Our guest this week is an artist, a photographer, and is involved in Asian American and Pacific Islander Coalition of Wisconsin and Elevation. He also sits on the board of the Woodland Pattern Book Center. But before I welcome him, I would like to remind everyone to please click on the subscribe button and the bell button so you get notification every time a new video is released. Hello everyone, this is Margie Bruce here at Global Inspiration, where you need to be seen, you need to be heard, and be an inspiration to the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest this week, Howard Liu.
Thank you, Margie. Very nice to be here and with you and your family.
So let's start with where were you born and raised and what brought you to Milwaukee?
So I was born in Taipei, Taiwan, um, and we moved to the United States when I was 5 years old. We first landed in Atlanta, Georgia, for a couple years. Then my my dad opened a Chinese restaurant in this small town in Alabama called Alexander City. Lived there for a couple years. Restaurant did pretty well, and we moved back to Taiwan when I was 12. When my dad was terminal with cancer, and so that he could be close to family. I lived in Taiwan for a number of years, and then eventually came to Milwaukee because I had aunt and uncle here, and ended up staying for college. And sort of, as they say, the rest is history.
So tell us about your involvement in the Asian American and Pacific Islander Coalition of Wisconsin and Elevation.
So the AAPI Coalition of Wisconsin was started last year around this time, last April. It was a initiative that to sort of gather all the AAPIs and in Wisconsin to combat the increased attacks on our AAPI um, people here in Wisconsin, but of course also a little bit um, um, also on the East Coast and West Coast more. It was also a good starting point to get us all together at the table to talk about issues that concern our communities. So the coalition was formed, and I was very honored to be asked to do some or design the logo and do some branding. Um, so the API Coalition Wisconsin since have been been talking to government officials, trying to really just show that the API has a voice, and the coalition is sort of the microphone for our community to speak to officials as well as the public. Um, and then Elevation, which was started about 5 years ago by uh, four API community leaders in Milwaukee, and they are Sherry Tran, Eric Kennedy, Mainza Tao, and Jessica Bowling. So four of them got together because they also recognized that there were no um, AAPI groups in Milwaukee, and they they sort of started informally and started bringing in more members, and now they're, I think, almost up. We're up to almost 200 people. Elevation just launched their outward-facing website as well as social media platforms on May 1st to commemorate this year's API Heritage Month. And Elevation activates activates the similarly to AAPI Coalition of Wisconsin. They activate they um, they're activists for the community, but they also have a lot of programming, education, and outreach. The two organizations work closely together. The founders of Elevation also serve on leadership roles, leadership roles in the coalition. So it goes hand in hand. So
Mm-hmm.
the coalition acts as sort of right now acts more like a conduit to talk to not just the public but government officials. We've gotten Senator Tammy Baldwin to come meet with us. We've gotten talks with um, um, Governor Evers, as well as Mayor Barrett of Milwaukee. And Elevation um, Elevation just launched this month the first ever Milwaukee Asian Restaurant Week, which is going to be May 16th through the 22nd. The first Asian Restaurant Week ever in Milwaukee, and that's huge.
You created a fundraiser where you designed a t-shirt and then all proceeds went to AAPI Coalition of Wisconsin. How did that came about and what message were you trying to convey?
Well, the idea came about um, watching the news around this time last year, seeing all the attacks on Asian Americans, and listening to people telling Asian Americans on the street to go back to China. Oh, you brought the virus, and um, it it sort of brought up this feeling that I think a lot of Asian Americans have about not belonging here and being seen as a perpetual foreigner. But we are also propped up as model minorities and not really being recognized as citizens of this country that many of us were born and raised here, and contributing to the greater cause and betterment of this country. So I was thinking about my own immigration story, my own parents' immigration story, and for them to come to the United States and being so proud of their giving their children a life as Americans, um, and how do I if I walk down the street, like how if I'm seen as a foreigner all the time, how do I how can I show that? Because if they look at me, if they look at an Asian person, they'll think, well, you're Asian first. You're not American first. You're Asian first. So in my own art practice, I started sketching, this idea of what is an American. I think thought about the Statue of Liberty, how that is sort of the symbol of immigration and the prosperity of the United States through the influx of people from all around the world throughout history. And I started drawing Statue of Liberty, and then thinking about, what is this? What does it mean to be Asian American? And I started exploring that thought, and I thought, it's I don't really have to explain myself, but I think the imagery would the common denominator, the commonality and the thing that really bring us all together is food. And going back to food, it's always going to be food. So I started drawing dumplings, and because I've had many conversations with several people about the dumpling and how it, like, every culture has a variation of a dumpling, basically a dough filled a dough filled with stuffing, whether it's tortellini or pierogi or Chinese or Japanese, Korean variations. We all have something like that. So I think it's a very universal food, and it's something that we can all enjoy. So I started thinking about how this phrase, dumplings for America, and started sort of creating this imagery. Once I was done, I showed it to friends, and they're like, "Oh, you should make a T-shirt." And didn't really want to, but because I don't really like selling stuff, but I did find this company here based in Milwaukee, called Ink to the People, and they are a company that prints T-shirts and merchandise for causes. Ink for the People actually put it out on their own platforms. They actually dressed up these two young, very good-looking people in the T-shirts, and shot some photos and used those in social media posts, and that's where it really blew up and started being circulated. And then a couple weeks later, my friend Eric Kennedy, he reached out to his friend Kristen Kraus at TMJ4, local news NBC affiliate. So Kristen Kraus contacted me and did an interview and put it on the news, and that blew up even more.
You are also a board member of the Woodland Pattern Book Center. Can you tell us about the center and what that means to you?
Woodland Pattern started 41 years ago. Actually, 2020 was going to be our 40th anniversary. And of course, we didn't have the big party that we was anticipating, but it was still, we got through okay. So Woodland Pattern was started by Anne Kingsbury and her partner Carl 40 years ago. They're both poets, really fantastic poets. Anne was the Milwaukee Arts Board Artist of the Year last year, or this year, 2021. So they started this book center to promote small presses, poems, or poetry, and then started an organization that does a lot of education with the youth, and also runs a little bookstore that sells small presses, poetry books, art books, and a lot of books on regional history. Has a huge they have a huge section of native literature, Native American literature, history, and they are a part of a larger network of poetry organizations nationwide. I believe Anne was one of the founders of the Poetry Coalition, and they've been flourishing through the 40 years, and have really touched and influenced a lot of people who went on to be professors or brilliant poets and literary artists. So it's very dear to my heart, not because I'm not in no way a poet, but it's an organization that has such great spirit, and it really touches a lot of people. And I always enjoyed I have always enjoyed their programs and their events. And so when I was asked, and just truth be told, it's the Woodland Pattern is about a block and a half from my where I live, and it's that place down the block with books that people walk by and are always curious about. But to me, it's such a gem. It's one of the most endearing things about in Milwaukee, and also in my neighborhood of River West.
I have visited your website, and the photographs are just stunning. So what draw you into photography?
Thank you. Um, my my inspiration in photography, I think, is just trying to find stories around me. I remember as a kid, I think 7 or 8 years old, um, getting really getting really fascinated with photography. Not thinking it as an art form, but more of a sort of technology. I was really played around with our family's point and shoot camera, and my parents, they were nice enough to indulge me and develop the film that I took. And every time a film comes back, we look through it. There's nothing. There's no people. My mom would always say, "There's no people in here. There's nothing in here. I don't know what you're taking pictures of." But I look at it and I sort of study I look at the photos in real fascination, because just thinking about how something is in real life, and then you capture it, and then it's frozen and framed in this on paper. Um, so from then really pursued photography. I was high school. I was in a camera club, um, and I continued on my own. When I went to college, I thought about studying photography, but I also, in a way, looked at it as a more of a hobby. So I pursued my other passion, which was architecture. But what really stuck with me throughout the years has been photography, and I continue to study and continue to learn anything I can. So I think the inspiration was my parents' sort of patience with me, and giving me this hobby to work on. But it's also my other inspirations are photographers that are doing really great work. One local photographer, Kevin Miyazaki, I really look up to, because his photos are not only beautiful, and he also does a lot of editorial and shoots for New York Times and other magazines, as well as local publications. But his projects that shows people and the relations with places are are great stories, and it's done in such a great way. Images are like an essay in itself. So people like Kevin and all my other photography friends that I see doing amazing work drives me to want to not emulate them, or not wanting their success, but to continue to tell my own story through my photography.
Can you share with us a website where our viewers can check out these amazing photos?
Sure, certainly. My photography website is howardlewphotography.com.
What inspirational message can you give to our viewers, especially in light of AAPI Heritage Month?
I would encourage people to go out and find a community, find people who not only look like you, but also share your experience as Asian Americans. There's a lot of commonality being Asian American, as I have found out in the past couple of years, getting to know ourselves better. There, I think there's always a stigma that we carry as people who grow up with Asian ethnic 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 identity, and not understanding the cultural identity with it. And there's a lot of shame that may come from that. I encourage you to go out there and find people who look like you and have these conversations with them and also with yourselves. Encourage everybody to look past the divisiveness and the surface and really get to know one another. I think asking questions is courageous. Being curious is very courageous. If you don't, if you feel like there's a barrier and you don't want to offend people, talk to them like they're real people, like a genuine person, like they're a family member who you don't understand. We don't always have the same values or experiences, but I think we can learn from each other no matter our race, ethnicity, or beliefs. I think we can all come together as humans and Americans to make our community and our country stronger.
Thank you so much, Howard. And more power to you.
Thank you.
And this is Margie Bruce here at Global Inspiration, where you need to be seen, you need to be heard, and be an inspiration to the world.